It's interesting to go back to the Snapchat earnings report that triggered this huge run-up in the shares, which everybody said, look, it turns out that means, you know, the online ad pie is big enough for other players. And your takeaway from it was almost to spin that around and say it also shows that for the likes of Facebook, this should be a really strong quarter, right?
Exactly. One of the key themes we've seen really around COVID is that advertising is the second derivative to e-commerce growth. After having a low during the Q2 period, companies needed new ways to engage with consumers. And you've seen a lot of those dollars flow from offline channels onto online channels. So Facebook, Pinterest, Snap, all beneficiaries of that trend.
So tell me what exactly you're expecting from their earnings this week, and you know what your reaction would be to the extent that it tells us anything. What does SAP's huge miss and the share reaction tell you about what's going on in software today?
Yeah, sure. I'll take those hand in hand. So first, just on expectations this week, I'd expect generally beats across the board to the top line. So slight upside for Facebook, Alphabet, and Twitter, and Pinterest. With respect to SAP, I don't cover software. I'll defer to my colleagues on that, but that seems to be more of a software-specific issue, more enterprise sales cycles elongating, whereas for these companies themselves, they're tied to advertising spend. So as long as brands and retailers are trying to reach consumers ahead of the holiday season, that should be a fairly good backdrop into Q3 and Q4.
Yeah, and obviously there's a big difference between talking about investments in capital equipment or software over several years' time and, you know, maybe marketing budgets, for instance. So we know that Facebook does a huge business with small business. I mean, that was one of the concerns earlier this year, was that these are the players that would be hurt most by the pandemic. What do you make of their fate right now and the relative positioning of Facebook and Google compared with some of the others?
Yeah, it's a great question. And both companies, Google and Facebook, have done a lot to help small businesses during this time frame. Just last week, you saw WhatsApp include new functionality to help small businesses around the world go online, reach consumers through in-chat messaging and shopping. So the pace of innovation is alive and well with both companies, and that's alleviating some of the concerns that you've seen from small business pressure. More of these companies now have to reach consumers online, and Google and Facebook are both great ways to do that.
In Google, Facebook, I know your top picks.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.